accept that. And otherwise, so today we'll be talking about our research paper. And that's it for today. So it probably will go fairly quickly. And then tomorrow's class, so class 2 of week 2, that's when we get back on schedule with our learning plan. And that's when we will look at Central Canada and go on from there, according to the learning plan, right on schedule. So good. This is our first lesson of week 2, talking about the research paper. And I was just saying, I think before I started recording, if you're looking for that one lesson, the Intro to Canada, Indigenous Canada, Lands and People lesson, it's recorded and it's posted to Canvas. So I'll share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so we did start off with one of our lessons, Intro to Canada. We did that. We did the Indigenous Canada, Lands and People lesson, like I said. We finished it about 3 slides early. So first, today we'll look at those last few slides before we start with this lesson about the research paper. So just to finish up that last lesson, in case you downloaded that PowerPoint and you thought, oh, we didn't make it all the way through. I did mention in our first class or our second class, the difference between climate and weather, but we didn't really see it written down anywhere. So here is a spot where you can come back and refer to about climate versus weather. So climate is kind of more general. It's what you expect, and weather is what you get. So climate is generally what a place is like. The example I think I used last week was Canada in the winter is cold. That's the climate. Today was cloudy. I don't know. I've been working inside all day. Let's say today was cloudy. That's weather. It's different from climate. Now let me just get my Zoom back in order here because it's covering up the chat and I want to make sure I can see if you've got any questions. Here we go, chat. Okay, good. So there we go. There's an example. So what's the climate of Las Vegas? So that's asking you not what it's like there today. It's asking you what it's like in general. So people could say it's hot, it's a desert, and it can get cold at night. So that's the climate. Weather is kind of going on right now. What's the weather today? What was the weather like when you went to Costa Rica? So climate and weather, they're similar, but a little bit different. And the reason we talk about them is because it affects tourism. So how might climate and weather affect tourism? What do you think? Maybe put it in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, turn on your microphones and say a few words.
Well, it'll affect like where or certain places people want to go, right? Like people want to go to the Dominican because it's nice and hot and sunny, but I don't think that many people want to go to like Antarctica where it's just freezing cold all the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big part of it. It affects where people go and also when. We talk about this mainly after the reading week in February, about seasons. Actually, that's the first thing that comes up next. So I'll click there. So climate and weather, they also affect the seasons of travel. And that means when we talk about seasons, it's not winter, spring, summer, fall. It's high season, low season, and what we call shoulder. So let's take Dominican Republic. That's a really good example. That's an island down in the Caribbean. We'll study it week 9, class 2. And the thing with the Caribbean is that it's beautiful. So is Dominican. But they can get hurricanes. And so their hurricane season is June to November. And And so most Canadians will go down on the high season, which is not hurricane season. So high season means nice weather, pleasant climate in general. It can also mean higher prices though. So if you're looking for low prices, you'd go in low season, which would be hurricane season, for example, or depending on where you are in the world, it could be monsoon season. For Canada, inbound tourism, meaning people coming here, low season is winter. We get less tourists in the winter than we do in the summer, and that's because of the climate. And shoulder season is in the middle, okay? Let's take Europe, for example, Western Europe. High season is summer. It's beautiful weather, it's not too rainy, but you'll have long lineups and the flights might be more expensive. Low season will be winter. You've got less people, which is a plus, but the weather is a bit more unpredictable. It can be gloomy, sometimes snowy or rainy, depending where you are in Western Europe. And in the middle is your shoulder season. So fall and spring are your shoulder seasons for Europe. And a lot of it has to do with the weather and the climate. So high season is pleasant weather. It'll be more expensive to travel. Low season is bad weather, but less expensive. And shoulder season is somewhere in the middle. I mentioned the Caribbean. We were talking about Dominican. Hurricane season is from June to November, with more of them happening in August, September, but it is possible to have them throughout June to November. So it's a question of safety sometimes. Is it safe to go to these places during those times? Or are they prone to flooding or hurricanes or something else based on the season? And the last thing that I thought of that how it affects tourism is last chance tourism. I should go see this place before it's gone. I should go see a glacier in Glacier National Park because it's going to be gone soon. Or Venice, it's normal for Venice to flood, but one of my friends recently said, I want to go to Venice one time before it's gone. So it's this sort of last chance tourism kind of idea that climate and weather can affect as well. So that's good. That's the last couple slides from that lesson that we finished early before. But just a few reminders before we look at the research paper and how to research for a paper. Make sure you go into Canvas and familiarize yourself with everything there, especially the learning plan and the modules page. Every week, things will be added through the week, especially right after classes. So you'll see that we have some map work to do, some activities to do. That's all. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. You're all adults. That's all optional. It is the activities on Canvas and the map work on Canvas. Those are not worth marks, but they will help you when it comes to writing your tests and your quizzes. So I know that lots of people have jobs and families and they're busy otherwise. So totally get it if you can't do them, but you will 100% do way better on your quizzes and tests if you do those activities and map works and the readings. And there's some videos to watch eventually as well. So familiarize yourself with those things, modules page, learning plan especially. Every time we're introduced to a new destination, and all of your destinations classes, you'll have a reading. This is the book, if you can see me. If not, it's called The World, A Traveler's Guide to the Planet. It's written by Lonely Planet. Every time you start a new destination, so for example, right now we're looking at Canada, there will be a reading associated with it. And it's just the pages that correspond to Canada. Pages 4 to 25, that will be your intro to geography, and then maybe Canada comes later because that seems too early for Canada. The countries are organized alphabetically in that book. So by the time you get to Canada, you're probably not pages 4 to 25. So that might be the introduction kind of to the book and to geography. And then every time you study a new country, you'll see that each country has its own page. And I'll put that on Canvas as well. There's a little activity you do after the reading, where it says on page 20, this is the top experience to do in Canada, and then you type it in and you see if you're right. So those are the sorts of things that will help you, like I said, when it comes to doing your tests and quizzes. And just a reminder to download and look at the PowerPoint from week 1 that's called Terminology. If you haven't done that already, or if this is the first time you're joining us, I did mention it before, but just make sure you go in there and look at that. It's all definitions. That's all it is strictly definitions. But it says, like, this is the official definition of an island. This is the official definition of an isthmus, etc. Okay, pretty dry to go through together in class. So it's something that you'll just do on your own, because we do refer back to those terms in class. Okay, research paper time. First things first, the due date. Before we even know what the research paper is, make sure you write this down. It's due Saturday, March 12th by midnight. If you want to hand it in early, you absolutely can. In fact, I would not wait until 11:50 on that day, because sometimes you turn on your computer and the computer needs to do updates, or your Wi-Fi connection is broken and you need to restart the modem or the router or whatever it's called. Anything could happen. So maybe if you're writing down due dates, write down the day before or the week before, depending how much time you have to prepare for any due dates you see at Mohawk. Normally, I used to try to do a week before. Then that way we wouldn't be rushing and stressed. But that's the actual official due date, Saturday, March 12th, that by midnight that day. Try to get it in a little bit earlier, just so you don't end up mistakenly bringing it in after midnight. These are also all local times, Ontario time. So I know sometimes we have students who join us from other places in the world. Just be aware of what our time translates to in your time. So what's the research paper about? You'll get, I'll move myself out of the way. You'll get 2 cities to research and provide some information on those cities. They will be cities in the Americas, so North, Central, South America. And this can be done with a partner, or it can be done individually. Usually these are all group projects, these destination courses. Each of them has a project, and usually they're done with groups. But I know it can be challenging when you're online and you haven't met any of your other colleagues of the other students in the class. So yes, you can do it individually if you'd like, or with a partner, or in groups. Maybe a good place to look if you're looking for group members is to go to that discussions page on Canvas. There's a discussions, on the left side where it says home module, it might say grades. There's a discussion button. If you click that, it'll bring you to a question and answer area. So maybe someone can post there, who wants to be in my group, or I'm looking for a partner, or whatever. So whether you decide to do it with someone else or by yourself, please email me by this Saturday by midnight with a couple pieces of information. So I'll want to know who you are, so student name and your student number, please. Our second semester group of students right now, there are 3 people with the same name. So just to avoid problems, it's good to get in the habit of writing your name and your student number in every email. But this email specifically, in the subject line, you'll put cities request and in the body of the email, you'll put your student name, student numbers. If there are more than one of you, if it's an individual assignment, that's okay too. Just student name, student number, and cities request in the subject. And then I'll write back with which 2 cities you'll research. The research paper in total is out of 40 marks, but that's shrunk down in your final mark. Out of 100% in the course, it will be worth 10% of your final mark. Okay. Be careful of plagiarism. This class or this lesson today, a lot of it will be about how to avoid plagiarism. So don't worry about that right now. If you don't know what that means, we'll talk about it in a moment. And on Canvas now, one of those modules, on the modules page, most of them say week 1, week 2, week 3. There's a welcome one. In between the welcome and the week 1 modules, there's a research paper module, and it has a bunch of different documents. We'll look at them all today, but make sure you download all of those and read through them carefully. So what will you need to look at for this research paper and these 2 cities? For each of the cities, we'll look at, research, explain general information, currency, which is another word for money. What kind of money do they use? Is it dollars? Is it whatever? Pesos? I'm trying to think of the different currencies around the Americas. The location, of course, is very important for a geography class. Language, climate, remember high season versus low season, and attractions. So this is a really important part to pay attention to because we're talking about how to avoid plagiarism. And I have been teaching now since 2007. And however often I mention plagiarism, there's always one person, at least in their 4 semesters at Mohawk in this case, or however many years of high school it was, doesn't matter. Every time I've taught, there's still one person who does it. So I like to think it's because they don't know how to avoid it. So we'll talk about that, and I'll give you very specific instructions on how to not plagiarize. But what is plagiarism? What does that even mean? It's also known as academic honesty. That's what Mohawk College calls it, academic honesty. Or fraud is the real word if we're not sugarcoating things. It's using other people's work as your own work. It's copy and pasting from the internet and putting it on a project of your own. It's taking a project from 3 years ago that another student, maybe a brother or a sister or a friend, you know, maybe they submitted it and then putting your name on it and giving it to me. That's still plagiarism. So it's using other people's work as your own. Mohawk, of course, has a 0 tolerance policy for plagiarism. If you're caught, the penalties range from don't do that to a written warning to having to leave the program completely and not getting a diploma, which is the absolute worst. That would be the worst way I can think of to have to leave the program. So good to be extra careful. Any project that's plagiarized, of course, will get 0. And here's a link to the policy that Mohawk College has published on what they call academic honesty, which is the same thing as plagiarism and same thing as fraud. Okay, enough about what will happen if you do it, because that's not very nice to talk about. I mean, it's important to know what will happen, but I trust all of you will not be tempted. So instead of me saying, this is what will happen to you if you do plagiarize, let's talk about how to avoid it in case you're wondering, is this going to be plagiarism? You're writing something down and you think, ooh, is this plagiarism? I'm not sure. So let's talk about how to avoid it. So first things first, this has to do with when you are researching a paper. If you have an assignment that says, what's the capital of Canada? And you write Ottawa, that's not plagiarism. There's only one answer. You know, of course, it's someone else's word, but it's a different case when you're doing a research paper. When you're doing a research paper, you will, as it sounds, research. You'll take books, you'll go online, you'll find information, and you'll take that information and put it in your project, in your research paper. So how do you make it so that you're not taking what they say on the website and putting it right in your paper? There's a couple steps. One is to, if you have maybe that was a mistake. If you have a question, just let me know in the chat or just talk over me. and then I'll stop. Because when we're in class, it's easier. You can put up your hand, but I can't. I hear a microphone. Do you have a question, or is that on maybe mistake? Okay, if you have a question, put it in the chat, or just you can talk on the microphone. Okay, couple steps on how to avoid plagiarism. So read the original text. Let's say you're on a website, and let's say that website is about Russia, about Moscow, and about the Red Square in Moscow, which is like their big town central city square. And there's a museum there called the Russian State Museum or something along those lines. That's the website we're on. We're looking at the Russian State Museum. Okay. So what you'll do is you'll read what the website says and then take notes on a separate piece of paper, or maybe on your computer, like on Microsoft Word or something. So actually, that Moscow example will come up soon. So let's say I'm looking at a website about Toronto. So I will write on my piece of paper, Toronto. And then I will write, the website says it's the capital of Ontario. Oh, okay. So I write Toronto equals capital of Ontario. And then it might say that there's a few things to see and do there. I'll write down CN Tower. I'll write down that it's on the waterfront. I'll write down that there's 2 airports. Okay, whatever the website says, you'll write it down separately on a different piece of paper, like I've done here. But in point form, which means short sentences, only the important stuff, like I've written down CN Tower, waterfront, 2 airports. Okay, then you close that website, take your notes, and create sentences with these notes. So I might say, Toronto is the capital city of Ontario. There are some things to see and do there, including the CN Tower, walk the waterfront, and in order to get to Toronto, you can fly into 2 different airports. That way I'm using my own sentences. I don't remember what they wrote on that website. It might be similar, but I'm using my own words. So if you ever find yourself copying and pasting, don't. That is plagiarism. There's one exception, which we'll talk about. And also, don't copy and paste into a paraphrasing tool. And that's a big word, but it just means that certain words are being changed, but it's still plagiarism. So if you ever copy and paste, think to yourself, oh boy, should I do this? There's one exception that we'll talk about, and it's called quoting, but that comes a little bit later. But first, this is a real example. This was a couple semesters ago, maybe last year, in Destination Europe, the second of your 3 destination courses. And this came to me on a semester project. So this is the original text. This was on the website of this person, what they were looking at. The original text says, this museum, which I think it's called the State Historical Museum, something like that. I think it comes up next. The original website says, a museum of Russian history wedged between the Red Square and the Manege Square in Moscow. Its exhibitions range from relics of prehistoric tribes that lived on the territory of present-day Russia through priceless artworks. Okay, so that's what it says on the website. Now, this is the project that I got. A gallery of, first of all, it doesn't make sense. Let's listen to it and you'll realize it doesn't make sense. A gallery of Russian records squeezed among Ruddy Square and Manege Square. It shows run from artifacts of ancient tribes that lived on the region of present-day Russia through invaluable craftsmanship. So I'm reading this project thinking, what on earth are they trying to tell me? First of all, the first thing I realize is that they've changed the name of a place. Red Square, they've changed it to Ruddy Square. Ruddy is kind of what they call a synonym. It's another word that means the same thing as red. You can't change the name of a place. So that's a big red flag for me. You know, it's like changing the name of Newfoundland, which is spelled Newfoundland. Maybe it's like fresh discovered earth. Like you can't change. So red flag, I realized something's wrong. Then I went to the original website and I saw that this was what was on the website. And this is what happens when you put something in what I said was called a paraphrasing tool. Match up these colors and you'll see that this person absolutely copied and pasted from a website into a paraphrasing tool. And what that does is it just changes the words to synonyms, to words that mean the same thing. So all of those colored words, you match the colors and you see that they're all synonyms. So the question is that plagiarism? I think I've made it clear with how I've been talking about it. So the answer, of course, is yes. So
The
if you,
first sentence of that second, like the project, doesn't
yeah,
even read like a English sentence.
no, that's the main problem. Well, main problem is that it's plagiarized, but
Yeah.
when I'm reading it, if it doesn't make sense, I mean, that's red flag number one. Red flag
Yeah.
number two is that it just doesn't flow. It's clearly something's wrong. And so Mohawk uses a program called Turnitin. So every time you turn in a major project, not like a little assignment or something, it will go through a program that detects plagiarism and it detects this. So you hit submit and it says something like 20% of your paper is recognized elsewhere online or another project or whatever. 20% is not bad, especially if you're using quotes. But sometimes it's like 90%, and that's something that this would be. So yeah, for sure, it's plagiarism. But let's take that same original example and see how we can avoid that from happening. So we have this original text, there's nothing wrong with it. How can we avoid it? So we take our trick with our piece of paper or separate document on Microsoft Word or whatever however you like to work, and we make points, point form notes. So it doesn't say it anywhere in here, but what they're talking about is the State Historical Museum in Moscow. We know that it's between the Red Square and the Manège Square. We also know that it has relics from prehistoric times and it has artwork. Okay, so that's all I'm going to write down. It's okay. It seems like not very much, and maybe it will be shorter when I write my own paragraph, but that's okay. The information is still there. So what would be acceptable is this. The State Historical Museum in Moscow is located between the Red Square and the Manège Square. It has relics from prehistoric times as well as beautiful artwork. So I've taken my notes, these 3 point form notes, and I've made my own sentences. So the final result you can see is different from the original text. So that's okay. That's how you avoid plagiarism. I mentioned there's one exception when you are allowed to copy and paste, and that's called quoting. So if you think that, well, first of all, you can, when you're using quotes, you can use quotes to write down the words that someone said. So if you're writing down what someone said verbally or out loud, then you put them in quotes. That's these little marks. Or if something is written really beautifully and you think that the meaning will get lost, if you don't quote it, then you can use a quote. So for example, if you want to use the exact text of a source, you can put it in quotation marks, which are these 2 little ticks there and 2 little ticks there, and include a reference at the end of the sentence. So let's say that was my quote, and this is the reference. We'll take a look at exactly how to do that as well in a moment. But that's what it looks like in the paper, like while I'm writing in my main section of that document, the Microsoft Word document. At the end of a quote or a sentence with specific information, I would put brackets, the author, not yourself. In my case, I'm just putting Kivil because that's an easy name to think of for me, but the author of the quote, and then the date that he said it, or she said it, or they said it. At the end of your project, you'll put a reference page You can call it references, you can call it bibliography. Both words will be written different places that you'll see. And that's where you'll put the long form of the reference, but we'll look at that in a moment. However, be careful with quoting. Don't just put quotes around your entire project and then submit it because there's quotes so you could copy and paste. Be really careful with quoting. If you think to yourself, should I quote this or not? Maybe it's best not to quote. It's best to change the sentence and use your own words like we looked at before. So only use quotes if you have a really good reason. Most of your paper should be in your own words. Like I said, don't put quotes around your whole project and then submit it. Only use quotes if you're really, really sure that they belong. If you aren't sure, leave them out, take notes, and create your own sentences like we just practiced. Quoting is okay when it's used to write down the words that someone said out loud, or to include a well-written passage whose meaning might be lost or changed if you write it in your own words. Okay. So I know it's a lot to remember, it's a lot to learn in one sitting, but if you have questions, just let me know. If you're writing your semester or your research paper and you think, oh, I kind of want to put this in there, I wonder if that will be plagiarism, email it to me. I don't mind if you email me a chunk of your project and say, is this okay to do? I'm trying to quote, is this okay? Or I've added references, but I don't know if I did it properly. Can you take a look? Absolutely. Just email me, of course, before the project is due. So how to provide references? When you're doing a research paper, which this is, like I said, you'll have to do research, which means looking at other sources and finding information from them. It might be our textbook from class. I encourage you to use that. It might be websites. It could be a news article shared on social media. So wherever you get your sources, there's a way to tell me where they came from. And that's called providing references. So it's not just for quotes, but it is for specific information. So in my example of Moscow, remember we used our own words. I changed those sentences, but I didn't use a quote. I would still need to provide a reference to tell the teacher where I got that information. And there's a specific way to do it, and it's called APA style. And every class at Mohawk, you'll use APA style references. So there will be a link to the APA style guide on Canvas under the research paper module. Or if it's easier for you, if you've already downloaded this lesson, this PowerPoint, you can go in here and click that link and it'll bring you to the same spot. Okay. One more thing about references, Wikipedia. Wikipedia, it's not a bad source of information. In fact, it's a wealth of information, and I use it, to be honest with you, all the time. But it doesn't belong in a project. And the reason is that it's not the first source of information. A Wikipedia article actually takes information from sources and puts it together in one source. So Wikipedia is not, essentially, it's not giving you the information. It's taking information from somewhere else. So let me improvise a bit. Mexican pyramids, for example. One of the first things that come up all the time is Wikipedia. So let's see. Yes, you can see it right away. You get all your information you usually get, and then there's little numbers here. 1, number 2, number 3. Maybe you've never looked at them, maybe you've never noticed them, but that's their way of giving references. So there's some very specific information, and they say, oh, by the way, I got this information from this source. So let's click on that number 1 and it'll bring us down to the bottom where it says references. So this is kind of exactly how your research paper will be laid out. You'll have references at the end. This, if you use Wikipedia, you'll have to, if like, for example, you include that piece of information on your research paper, paraphrased, not copied and pasted. Remember, taking notes and you write it in your own words, you still need to tell me where you found that information. So you'll have to go click that number 1 and then go to the original source. So here we go. Now we're looking at a book. This is the book, Encyclopedia of Dubious Archaeology. Okay, so that's the book. We know who it's written by. So that's where you'll get your information to write down your reference. We'll look at another example in a minute, so you'll see. But that way you're not citing, you're not referencing Wikipedia, you're referencing the actual book that Wikipedia got the information from. So when you're doing references, don't reference Wikipedia. Okay, now there is a specific way to provide these references. There's 2 things to take a look at. One is called a citation, one's called a reference. So this looks familiar to you. This is our paragraph about Moscow. The State Historical Museum in Moscow is located between the Red Square and the Manege Square, etc. Now, I said we got that from a website. Maybe that website had an author, but in my case, I've used this specific example. I've pretended that it was from a book. So you have 2 authors here, that's their last names, and then the date the book was published. And if you can see, yes, you should be able to, my camera, I've rolled out of the way, one moment. The fake information, well, it's real information, it came from a website, but this is the book I'm citing. Kind of fun. I used to get a little book like this from every place that I went. And when I went to Moscow in 2011, I picked this up. And so at the front of the book, I know different languages do it differently. In French, for example, usually it's all at the back of the book. But for English books, usually you've got all of the information at the front. The authors, the publisher, the date it was published, all of that will be found at the front. But anyway, back to the slide we're looking at. Let's say this came from a book. That little thing in brackets there from here, where it says Geider and Kartanova, 2009, that's called a citation. That's a citation. It's short and it's in the middle of your project. At the end of your project, you'll have a page that says references or bibliography. There's that word I said earlier. And you'll have a longer version that tells me exactly where I can find that same source you used. So last name, comma, space, first initial, period, comma. It's super specific. And so just make sure you're looking at it really carefully. See how the word Moscow is what they call in italics. It's kind of slanty like that. All of that matters when you're doing APA style references. So there's different ways, different formats, let's say, to write down your references. Whether if it's a book, that's what you see on the screen now. If it's a website, that's the format to use for a website. You've got the date it was retrieved, because websites can change every day. And the link, that's the format for a website, but there's different sources. You know, maybe you've interviewed someone. Maybe you're looking at a Facebook post of a news article. So there's different ways to write down. This is the book and the website way to write things down. For the other stuff, you'll go to that APA guide. And that'll tell you all of the different things. Maybe you even saw an article on LinkedIn. There's a spot on the website there to tell you how to do that. Okay, I know there's a lot to think about and a lot of information. And sometimes it can be scary when we talk about plagiarism, like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. What if I do it wrong? Like I said, if you have questions, please ask me. If you're not sure, is this plagiarism? Am I allowed to do this? Write me an email. I'll be happy to look at it and let you know the right direction to go from there. But the best thing to do is ask, because if something is plagiarized, you get 0. And that leads to a whole other slew of problems, including maybe not passing the course and then having to repeat semesters, and it's just a mess. Okay, so we will look at a couple things now. You can still see my screen, I trust. So if you have questions about plagiarism, maybe put them in the chat, or you can turn on your microphone and let me know. Otherwise, we'll get through and talk about what the paper actually looks like. What do you need to research, and how. So like I said earlier, each of these destination courses has its own research paper. Destination Americas, Destination Europe, Destination World. They all have their own project. This one, it starts off easy. This one, I've given you a template, and you kind of just fill in the blanks with sentences. And then it gets more and more involved. And by your last destinations course, it's a bigger project. But for all of them, they'll have an instructions page, like what we're looking at now. And more or less, you'll be researching a destination for all of them. So here, the document is called Research Paper Instructions. You can see that in the top left of my screen, and it's available on Canvas under the Research Paper module. So what you'll do is you'll research 2 major cities in the Americas somewhere. So North America, South America, Central America, maybe in the Caribbean, as long as it's in that general region. You'll research 2 major cities and provide information about them. So here's some instructions. Number 1, email me with your student names and student numbers. Remember to put city request or cities request in the subject line. I'll reply with the 2 cities that you're going to research. And once again, you can do this with a partner or individually. If you're working with a partner, make sure you put their name and their student number as well in this email. But if you are doing it with a partner, just 1 email from each group is fine. I don't need 2 emails telling me the same thing, for example.
Is this instruction sheet available to download?
Yeah, it should be on Canvas.
Oh, okay, cool.
I made it available this morning. If you haven't looked yet, maybe it wasn't available like yesterday though, if you looked. Research paper. Yeah, it's all there. So it should be
Okay.
available now.
Sweet.
Okay, so yeah, next one is using the questions below. Provide information in your own words, so not plagiarized again. The questions must be answered using the template, which we'll look at, which is this in a minute. So what are you going to look at? You're going to find, but also explain, and that's underlined because it's important. General information about your destination. So climate, be specific. If you are researching Aruba, don't just write it's hot. Tell me high season in Aruba is during this part of the year. Maybe diving, scuba diving brings people to Aruba. So maybe you can tell me high season for diving is during this month or something like that. Currency, again, that's money. What kind of money do they use? If you're looking at Costa Rica, they use the colon. So tell me about that. Don't just say they use the colon. Maybe say, well, I'll get into what this is, but tell me, is it easy to find a bank machine there? Should I bring cologne with me, or can I bring Canadian dollars and exchange them there? ROE is rate of exchange. So for example, if you're researching a city in the States, in the US, the ROE is usually around, I don't know, these days between 70 and 80 cents on the Canadian dollar. So that's what a rate of exchange is. How much will 1 Canadian dollar give me in local currency? 1 Canadian dollar might give me 80 cents, 78 cents US. That's the rate of exchange, ROE. Where are these cities within that country or state? What's the information about the airport? And include the airport code. So that's different from the name. For example, in Toronto, there's an airport called Toronto Pearson. It's the big one, but the code is YYZ. So make sure you include both. Language, what's the entry requirement? Language is easy. That explains itself. Entry requirements, do I need a passport as a Canadian citizen? Do I need a passport to go to Vancouver? Do I need a passport to go to Cuba? Do I need a passport to go to Brazil? Some countries you need a visa for. You'll research whether you need a visa to go into a country. And I don't mean the credit card. I mean the stamp or the sticker that you get into your passport before you go into the country. Sometimes you can get it when you arrive, but anyway, I don't think many countries in the Americas you do need one, to be honest. South America has some, but you probably won't run into that issue, but good idea to take a look at if you need one. And you can find that on the Government of Canada website. How long does your passport need to be valid for? That's a really important question because lots of people don't realize. When I was a travel agent, so many times people would try to book a trip with me. Let's say they wanted to go away in 2 weeks. Today's January 12th. Let's say they were leaving January 20th. And they wanted to go wherever, doesn't matter. Dominican Republic. Well, Dominican Republic has rules. Most countries in the world have rules about how long your passport needs to be valid for. So their passport might be valid when they book the trip, during the trip, and after they come back. Maybe their passport expires in March, so 2 months from now, but lots of countries require that your passport is valid for at least 6 months after you come back. 6 months tends to be the magical number for most countries. Some of them are 3, but either way, if they wanted to go away next week, let's say their passport expires in February. So after they get back from their trip, they still might not be able to go. So that's another question for the Government of Canada website. If you're taking notes, the best website to go to is travel.gc.ca. travel.gc.ca. Then you've got a search bar here. So let's type in Dominican Republic. So you can put the name of your country there. If you're researching a city, which all of you will be, put the country name there, not the city. And then the first thing that comes up is travel advice and advisories for Dominican Republic. So we'll click that and scroll down past all the COVID stuff, which is normal now to see. And you'll go to this section here. It's got a nice flag there and it says Dominican Republic. Down here, you've got different tabs, risk levels, safety and security. You will click entry and exit requirements. And that, after all the COVID stuff, will tell you passports. Let's see here. Oh, good. Well, this country is different. Your passport must be valid for the expected duration of your stay in the Dominican. Okay, well, that was easy. Do we need a visa? Visas. Tourist visa not required. Okay, so that's where you'll go to find that information, whether you need a visa or how long your passport needs to be valid for. Let's go to Paraguay, a country down in South America. Same idea, it will bring you to this section. You click travel advice and advisories, go past the COVID stuff. You've got the nice flag. Down here, you've got your tabs, entry and exit requirements. Let's go there. Down, 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 down. Passports. Okay. Well, again, this one is expected duration of your stay. Visa, not required. Oh, there's a departure tax, though. We'll talk about that later on in the semester. But sometime, this is where you would see this country requires you to have 6 months of validity, they call it, in your passport. So it needs to be valid for 6 months after you get back. These are very interesting examples that I've chosen because they're not really illustrating my point. Oh, right. England is not especially. There we go. Let's try the UK. Travel advice and advisories. This is the last one I'll try. I just want to show you what it looks like if it does say. Not quite. And we don't need a visa. Okay. Well, anyway, that's where you'll look for how long your passport needs to be good for. So it'll say regular Canadian passport. All three examples I've used today are just for the duration of this stay. As a travel agent, we would always recommend 6 months. Visas, that's where if you need one, it will say in that section. For example, Brazil used to require that Canadians had a visa. Okay, attractions. Describe 2 major attractions. So every city has museums, every city has zoos. Be more creative, like what's bringing me to that specific place? Maybe if I give you Mexico City, what is unique to Mexico City? It's not a zoo, it's not a museum, unless it's really famous. Like the San Diego Zoo, that's a really famous zoo. Or the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, that's a really famous museum. The Louvre Museum to go see the Mona Lisa in Paris. Those are big enough to use in this example, in this section. But otherwise, what else might be taking me there? In Mexico, maybe there's a really cool pyramid to drive and see just outside the city. Okay, and then go into detail, like don't just list them, say how much will it cost me? Are they closed? Sometimes places are closed Mondays, for example. And then submission, every city you write about, it should be able to fit on 1 page, but that's not necessary. If you want to write more, you can write more, but you'll be using the template. And to make things easy for yourself, don't change the font, the size, anything like that. It's laid out the way it should look for you already. Both cities will be submitted in 1 document. Make sure you keep the cover page, the bibliography, and use your sources. Don't cite Wikipedia, don't be late, and you already know this stuff, how much it's worth, the fact that we use Turnitin, and when it's due. This is what they call a rubric, and essentially it helps you as you're writing the project. You should always look at this document and make sure you have all of these things. This essentially is a good way to guarantee that you'll get good marks. So you look at this as you're writing your project. Do I have a title page? Yes or no? Is it completed properly? Yes, okay, then I'll automatically get 2 marks. City number 1, whatever it is, did I go into detail with the climate? Did I go into detail with the currency? Like in the US, maybe you say the US uses dollars. That's gonna give you a 1. If you say the US uses dollars, if I take $100 Canadian, I'll get $78 US. It's easy to use bank machines there. You can use your credit card, et cetera, then you get the 2 marks. So make sure you go into detail with everything. Okay, same with all of this. We've talked about all of it already. City number 2 is here, talked about that already, and your bibliography reference page. Is it even there? No, then you'll get 0 for that section. Is it included? Then you get 2. So 2 marks just to remember to do the reference page. APA style formatting, if it's wrong, you'll get 2, but if it's correct, the formatting, you'll get 4. So the APA style is pretty important. It's 4 marks out of 40, so it's 10% of the value of the project itself. So keep looking back at this document as you're writing your research paper, and that way you'll be sure to do a great job. And lastly, this is your template. So you'll download this and pretty much just fill in the blanks. So Destination Americas, maybe I'm asking you to look at, Rio de Janeiro, which is a bad example because I'm not entirely sure how to spell it. No, I got it wrong. And so maybe you're looking at Rio in Brazil and San Jose, Costa Rica. So you'll fill in those blanks. Student name, make sure you put your name, not leave it as student name, take away the brackets, put your student number, etc., etc. Here's an example of a quick informative description about a city. City 1 is the capital and most populated city of Fay Country. With the history dating back to Middle Ages, there's lots of old buildings to see, traditions that have been practiced for centuries. It's not a quote, but it is specific information. So this is where I got the information. It's the book, for example. I'm making this up, of course. Then you can keep these descriptions, these headings. So climate, you'll fill in a little paragraph about that. Currency, a paragraph about that. Second city, same thing. And your reference page, I've just put some examples there for you. So it's pretty well laid out for you. You don't really need to stress too much about it. But if you do have questions, like I've said, email me. Don't feel like you're just lost and you're swimming and you're scared. And make sure you know that you can reach out to me if you have questions. Like I said, every destinations course has a project like this where you will record, not record, I just looked at my recording button. You will research a destination, talk to me about attractions, maybe accommodations in future semesters, or maybe this one, depending if it's on that list. But anyway, all of the destinations courses has a project like this. And since your first semester, then you won't know yet, but every class that goes through these destination courses, by the end of them, when you're in your third semester and you've finished the last project, I will choose one of the destinations you've written about from someone's project, and I'll go to the destination. And I can't guarantee I'll do the same activities, like I'm not going to bungee jump. And I can't guarantee that I'll stay in whatever accommodation you recommend, because that can be a bit finicky too. But one of your projects will inspire me to go somewhere. So put your heart into it, and I'll see it. That's it for the project. Really, I didn't show you the APA style guide, but it is available on Canvas under that semester project or research paper module. Okay, so that's all for now. Do you have questions? Actually, I'll stop recording so you're not asking